Okay, it is now Sunday, July 16th. I'm still pre-recording because I am on my way home from vacation. I don't know if I got home yesterday or if I'll get home today, Sunday, but sometime this weekend I will make it home and I can start reading to you live again. We left off Friday, The Witch of Blackbird Pond. John Holbrook wanted to speak to Uncle Matthew about marrying Mercy, and everything got misunderstood, and now he is engaged to Judith. So, the young kids were getting ready to walk to the husking bee. Presently, the four set out together into the still frosty twilight. Judith took John's arm confidingly, still carried quite beyond constraint on her wave of happiness. "You'll never know," she chattered. "You saved me from being the most outrageous hussy, John. I had a scheme. I'm not sure I would have dared, actually, but now—" "Now what?" Kit asked, walking behind them. She ached with her own stifled protest. He can't do this, she told herself over and over, but she knew that he could. John understood Mercy. He knew that she had never in her life reached her hand for so much as a crust of bread that Judith might want. If he should hurt Judith now, Kit knew Mercy would never forgive either him or herself. Lost in her own thoughts, Kit barely noticed that William's dignified pace was even more deliberate than usual. They had dropped some distance behind the others when a purposeful hand grasped her own elbow. "Wait a moment, Kit," said William. "Let them go ahead. I want to talk to you." The quiet resolution in his voice penetrated her racing thoughts. Reluctantly, she gave him a corner of her attention. The intent look in his eyes, even in the waning light, warned her of what was coming. Oh no, not after all that had happened. She was tempted to run for the shelter of the fireside in Mercy. "I didn't mean to speak tonight," William was saying, "but watching those two, don't you envy their happiness, Kit?" "I can't bear it," she thought in panic. "Not tonight." The last two words escaped into a half-whisper. William took them literally. "Tomorrow, then. Let me speak to your uncle. You won't need to help me out," he added with unwonted humor. "I am quite capable of speaking for myself." Kit stood shivering in the damp twilight. The silk dress is not warm enough for New England, she thought irrelevantly. Then she made an effort to gather her forces. William's question was not unexpected after all. She had thought about what her answer was already. "Please, William," she whispered, "don't speak to him yet." William looked down at her, perplexed. "Why not? Don't you want to marry me, Kit?" She hesitated. "I had not thought of getting married so soon." "Judith is just 16, he reminded her. "I know, but I'm still a stranger, William. There are so many things I have to learn." "That's true," he agreed. He was silent a moment. "I won't hurry you, Kit," he said reasonably. "The house can't be finished before spring anyway. I'll wait for your answer." What her answer would be he seemed to have not the slightest doubt. As they walked on, his hand remained on her elbow with a new possessiveness. Laughter spilled from the open door. The great barn was glowing with lanterns swinging from the hand-hewn timbers. There was a fragrance of new hay and the warm, reassuring smell of cattle. The gaily dressed young people sat in a circle around a vast mound of silk-tasseled corn, and already the husking had begun. Shouts of welcome greeted the newcomers, and the circle shifted to make room for them. To Kit's surprise, the husking was fun, enlivened by singing and wagers and jokes that seemed uproariously funny. She was astonished. Wethersfield was not always a dull, solemn place. Had her uncle ever been to a husking, she wondered? All at once a new shout went up. Judith sat with a half-shucked ear of corn in her lap, and from the ruffled silk peeped bright orange-red kernels. Judith laughed and tossed back her head with all her old arrogance. "I haven't any need for a thing like that," she said triumphantly. "What am I offered for it?" Without waiting for an answer, she tossed it straight across the circle into William's hands. There were a few quick giggles, a hush of curiosity. Kit sat helpless, her cheeks on fire, and then the laughing and the cheering left her giddy as William stepped resolutely forward to claim his forfeit. Chapter 14. After the keen, still days of September, the October sun filled the world with mellow warmth. Before Kit's eyes a miracle took place for which she was totally unprepared. She stood in the doorway of her uncle's house and held her breath with wonder. The maple tree in front of the doorstep burned like a gigantic red torch. The oaks along the roadway glowed yellow and bronze. The fields stretched like a carpet of jewels, emerald and topaz and garnet. Everywhere she walked, the color shouted and sang around her. The dried brown leaves crackled beneath her feet and gave off a deliciously smoky fragrance. No one had ever told her about autumn in New England. The excitement of it beat in her blood. Every morning she woke with a new confidence and buoyancy she could not explain. In October, any wonderful, unexpected thing might be possible. As the days grew shorter and colder, this new sense of expectancy increased, and her heightened awareness seemed to give new significance to every common thing around her. Otherwise, she might have overlooked a small scene that, once noticed, she would never entirely forget. Going through the shed door one morning, with her arms full of linens to spread on the grass, Kit halted, weary as always, at the sight of her uncle. He was standing not far from the house, looking out toward the river, his face half turned from her. He did not notice her. He simply stood idle for one rare moment, staring at the golden fields. The flaming color was dimmed now. Great masses of curled brown leaves lay tangled in the dried grass, and the branches that thrust against the graying sky were almost bare. As Kit watched, her uncle bent slowly and scooped up a handful of brown dirt from the garden patch at his feet, and stood holding it with a curious reverence, as though it were some priceless substance. As it crumbled through his fingers, his hand convulsed in a sudden passionate gesture. Kit backed through the door and closed it softly. She felt as though she had eavesdropped. When she had hated and feared her uncle for so long, why did it suddenly hurt to think of that lonely, defiant figure in the garden? Judith's voice interrupted her groping thoughts. "Hurry up, Kit," she called. "That's the third group of people that's gone past the house. They say there's a trading ship coming up the river. If we finish the washing, we can watch it come in." Kit's heart leaped. What ship? What does it matter? It will bring mail and perhaps some new bolts of cloth and maybe the scissors we ordered from Boston. Anyway, it's fun to see a ship come in, and there won't be many more this fall. An odd confusion, half eagerness, half reluctance, tossed Kit's spirits to and fro. She was minded to stay at home and help Mercy, even as her feet hurried her along the path beside Judith. But the moment they rounded the bend in the road, she forgot her uncertainty. There was the Dolphin coming up the river with all her sails. The curving tail of the prow was chipped and dull. The hull was battered and knobby with barnacles, the canvas dark and weathered. Yet how beautiful she was! In a surge of memories, Kit could almost feel the deck lifting beneath her feet, and a longing almost like homesickness caught at her throat. How she would love to sail on the Dolphin again. Forgotten was the smell of horses, the motionless waiting, the sudden terror of gale and lightning. She remembered only the endless shining reaches of water that stretched to the end of the world, the vast arc of the Milky Way, and the scouring rush of salt wind that blew back her hair. What would she give to stand on the deck of the Dolphin, facing down the river toward the open sea in Barbados? The Dolphin rounded to, her topsails were furled, and with a great creaking of lines and shudder of canvas, she came to rest alongside the Wethersfield dock. The onlookers crowded forward as bales and barrels and knobby bundles were passed over the sides into their eager hands. Kit and Judith stood a little aside, enjoying the bustling scene. The excitement of the crowd seemed to be contagious. When Judith spoke, Kit was surprised to find that her own lips were strangely unmanageable. A queer trembling made her clench her fists tight. She could not turn her eyes away from the deck of the ship. At last she glimpsed a fair head emerging from the hatchway, almost hidden behind a vast load. It was some time before Nat Eaton, carelessly scanning the busy wharf, caught sight of her. Then he raised one hand in the briefest possible greeting. Kit knew how Nat could be when he was absorbed in the ship's business. She waited, pretending an interest in each bit of cargo that came over the rail. Gradually, the citizens of Wethersfield claimed their orders. The merchants from Hartford counted off the barrels of nails and oil and salt, and only a handful of idlers still stood about. "Come on, Kit," urged Judith. "There's nothing more to see." No, Kit had to agree. There was not the slightest excuse for lingering further. With a little shrug, she turned away, and immediately she heard his voice. "Mistress Tyler, wait a moment." She whirled back to see Nat bounding over the rail. He came toward her with his light, buoyant step, carrying under his arm a bulky package wrapped in a bit of sailcloth. "Good day to you, Mistress Wood," he greeted Judith respectfully. Then he turned to Kit. "Would you be kind enough to deliver a bit of cargo for me?" The words were acceptable enough. It was the indifferent tone that was bewildering. "'Tis a length of woolen cloth I picked up for Hannah," he explained, holding out the package. Kit took it reluctantly. "She'll be waiting for you to come yourself." "I know, but my father is anxious to be off. Lose this wind and we'll be delayed here for days. Hannah might need this, if you can spare the time from your fashionable friends." Kit's mouth opened, but before she could speak he went on. "An interesting cargo we had this trip. One item in particular. 16 diamond-paned windows ordered from England by one William Ashby. They say he's building a house for his bride, a hoity-toity young lady from Barbados, I hear, and the best is none too good for her. No oiled paper in her windows, no indeed." She was taken aback by the biting mockery in his voice. "You might have mentioned it, Kit," he said, lowering his voice. There's nothing definite to tell." "That order looks definite enough." While she searched for something to say, she knew that his eyes had not missed the hot surge she could feel sweeping up from the collar of her cloak to the hood at her forehead. "May I congratulate you?" he said. "To think I was worried about that little bird. I might have known it would gobble up a nice fat partridge in no time." Then with a quick bow to Judith, he was gone. "What bird? What was he talking about?" panted Judith breathlessly, keeping up with Kit's sudden haste. Her head turned away to hide her angry tears. Kit did not answer. "Honestly, Kit, you do know the oddest people. How did you ever meet a common riverman like that?" "I told you he was the captain's son." "Well, I certainly don't think much of his manners," observed Judith. To Kit's relief, a distraction awaited them at home. Rachel stood in the doorway, peering anxiously up the road. "I declare," she fretted, "there is no peace for the poor man. Someone came to fetch him just now, said a rider came out from Hartford with news this morning, and there's a great crowd at the blacksmith shop. Can you see anything up the road, Judith?" "No," said Judith. "The square seems quiet." "I think it has something to do with that Governor Andros in Massachusetts, the one who is determined to take the charter away." "Oh dear, your father will be so upset." "Then let's get him a good dinner," suggested Judith practically. "Don't worry, Mother. The men can take care of the government." Following them into the house, Kit felt grateful to the unpopular Andros. Whatever he had done, he had saved her for the moment at least from any more of Judith's questions. Matthew Wood did not come home for the good meal they had made ready. Late in the afternoon, he came slowly into the kitchen. His shoulders sagged and he looked ill. "What is it, Matthew?" Rachel hovered over his chair. "Has something terrible happened?" "Only what we have expected," he answered wearily. "Governor Treat and the council have warded it off for nearly a year. Now Sir Edmund Andros has sent word, 3 days since, that he is setting out from Boston. He will arrive in Hartford on Monday to take over as royal governor in Connecticut. Lay a fire in the company room," he added. "There are some who will want to talk tonight." One other chance bit of news reached them before nightfall. For all his haste, Captain Eaton had missed the wind after all, and the Dolphin lay becalmed just off Wright's Island. Kit took a revengeful pleasure in the thought. She hoped they had a good long wait ahead of them. It would serve Nat right if they sat there till the ice set in. He might perfectly well have delivered his own package, and she would make very sure of one thing. She would take care not to deliver it herself till the Dolphin was well on its way toward Saybrook. Chapter 15. "It means the death of our free Commonwealth. 'Twill be the end of all we've worked for." The angry voices came clearly through the closed door of the company room. It was impossible not to overhear. Mercy's spinning wheel faltered, and Rachel's hand, lighting a pine knot, trembled so that a spark fell on the table unheeded and left a small black scar. Frequently in the past month, the same grim-faced men had called upon Matthew Wood, but tonight the voices had a frightening quality. "They must think it is a desperate matter to meet like this on the eve of the Sabbath," said Mercy. "Your father never touched his supper," fretted Rachel. "Do you suppose it would do to offer them all a bite when they come out?" Kit dropped a stitch for the third time. She had little concern for the colony of Connecticut, but she was seething with curiosity over one aspect of tonight's business. Some time ago William had arrived, offered his usual courteous greetings to the women, and then, instead of taking his place by the fireside, had astounded her by knocking boldly on the company room door. More surprising still, he had been admitted, and there he had stayed behind that closed door for the past half-hour. Pride could not restrain her tongue another moment. "What in the world is William doing in there?" she burst out. "Why would Uncle Matthew let him in?" "Didn't you know?" Judith threw her a condescending glance. "Know what?" "William came over to Father's way of thinking 2 months ago, even before his house was raised, when he had to pay such high taxes on his land." Now, how did Judith know that? Kit stared at her. "I never heard him say a word about it." "Maybe you weren't listening." Judith's tone had more than a touch of smugness. Chagrined, Kit jerked at another dropped stitch. It was true, sometimes when William and Judith were talking about the house, it was all she could do to keep her mind from wandering. But she knew she would have remembered anything as important as this. Was William ashamed to admit to her that he had turned against the king? Or did he think she was too stupid to understand? The voices broke out again. "This Governor Andros says right out that deeds signed by the Injuns are no better than scratches of a bear's paw. We are all to beg new grants for land we've bought and paid for. Why, the fees alone will leave us paupers. They can come into our meeting house and order us to kneel and whine tunes like their Church of England. My cousin in Boston actually had to put his hand on the holy book to swear in court. I'll shoot any man that tries to make me do that. They could hear Matthew's voice, cold and steady, never raised or out of control. Whatever happens, he was saying, we do not want any shooting here in Connecticut. Why not? Broke in another voice. Should we hand over our freedom without a murmur like Rhode Island? I say defy him, came a hoarse voice. 9 train bands having trouble reading today. My mouth won't work. 9 train bands we have ready in Hartford County, nigh unto 1,000 men. Let him look into a row of muskets, and he'll change his tune. It would mean senseless bloodshed, Matthew said clearly. For nearly an hour the voices went on, the angry shouting gradually giving way to low, tense words that could not be distinguished. Finally, a silent, tight-mouthed group of men emerged with no interest in the refreshments that Rachel timidly offered. When they had gone, Matthew lowered himself heavily into a chair. It is no use, he said. We must spend the Sabbath in prayer that God will grant us patience. Rachel searched for some words of comfort. I know it is a disappointment, she attempted, but will it truly change our lives so very much? Here in Wethersfield, I mean. We will still all be together in this house, and surely we will not lose our rights as citizens of England. Her husband brusquely waved away her comfort. That is all a woman thinks about, he scoffed. Her own house. What use are your so-called rights of England? Nothing but a mockery. Everything we have built here in Connecticut will be wiped out. Our council, our courts will be mere shadows with no real power in them. Oh, we will endure it, of course. What else can we do? If only we could somehow hold back the charter itself. This man has no right to take it from us. Not till later, when she and Judith undressed, shivering in the chilly upstairs chamber, did Kit venture to make a comment. They don't seem to realize, she whispered, how powerful the royal fleet is. Once when the royalists were trying to hold Bridgetown, Barbados, Parliament sent a troop ship and subdued them in no time. Oh, I don't think there'll be any fighting, said Judith confidently. It's just that men like Father don't like to be dictated to. Dr. Bulkeley says the charter was never intended to be as free as they have made it. He thinks the men of Connecticut have taken advantage of the king's generosity. So I suppose John thinks so too, Kit couldn't resist adding. Once Judith would have flared, but her new happiness was hard to shake. Poor John, she laughed now. He's so mixed up between Dr. Bulkeley and Father. Honestly, Kit, I agree with Mother. I don't believe it will change our lives much. Men make such an awful fuss about things. I just wish it hadn't happened 4 days before Thanksgiving. It's going to spoil the holiday and have everyone so gloomy. I'd be curious to see this Governor Andros, said Kit. You remember Dr. Bulkeley told us he used to be a captain of the dragoons in Barbados. Maybe we can see him, said Judith, blowing out the candle and hopping into bed. If he comes up from New London, he'll have to cross the river at Smith's Ferry. I'm going to get a peek at him no matter what Father says. You don't often get a chance to see all those soldiers in uniform. For a good many Wethersfield citizens, curiosity got the better of loyalty the next afternoon. Kit and Judith met a fair number of farmers and their wives traveling along South Road and ranging along the banks of the river. They had a good hour's wait ahead of them, lighted by the arrival of an escort from Hartford, led by Captain Samuel Talcott, one of the Wethersfield men, Kit noted with surprise, who would occasionally join the meetings in her uncle's company room. I'd have no part in greeting that Andros, commented one farmer. The crowds would pick my bones before I'd do it. Look at the fine horse, all ready for his highness. They should have asked me. I'd have found a horse for him all right. Captain Talcott sensed the growing anger in the waiting crowd and raised his voice. There is to be no demonstration, he reminded them. The governor comes here under orders from his majesty. He will be received with all due courtesy. Presently a murmur arose as the first red-coated horseman appeared on the opposite shore. There he is, excited voices cried. The tall one just getting off his horse. He's getting into the first boat there. The ferry boats crossed the wide river without mishap, and the party from Boston stepped out onto the shore at Wethersfield. More than 70 men were there, with 2 trumpeters and a band of grenadiers. I don't know what that word is. Kit thrilled at the sight of the familiar red coats. How tall and handsome and trim they looked beside the homespun blue-coated soldiers. And Andros, he was a true cavalier with his fine embroidered coat, his commanding air, and the wealth of dark curls that flowed over his velvet collar. How elegantly he sat in the saddle of his borrowed horse. Why, he was a gentleman, an officer of the king's dragoons, a knight. Who were these common resentful farmers to dispute his royal right? He made their defiance seem childish. And there is a picture of Andros. And we are not quite at 20 minutes, but that is a good stopping point, and there are several pages left in the chapter. So I am going to leave you there, and Wednesday is junior fiction time again, and I will be back on Wednesday reading to you live. So I hope you all enjoy your day, and let me see, tomorrow we will be reading an early chapter book, Joshua, what is that kid's name? Andrew Joshua in the Show and Tell War, I think is the name of it. And then Tuesday we will have picture books, which, like you know, are my favorite. So I will see you all back at the library this week. Thanks for watching. Bye.